There is a curious moment in public life when power reveals itself not through triumph, but through retreat. When those who once insisted they needed escape begin quietly searching for a way back. And that is the moment we find ourselves in now. Because what I am about to tell you is not rumor, not gossip, not idle palace chatter. It is something far more unsettling. Behind the carefully curated California sunshine, behind the curated compassion and selective silences, discussions have been unfolding, serious ones about a return to Britain, not a courtesy appearance, not a sentimental visit, a return. The irony alone is breathtaking. For years, the story we were told was simple and absolute. The United Kingdom was unbearable. The monarchy was suffocating. The press was cruel beyond endurance. America, we were assured, would be freedom, reinvention, vindication. And yet, history has a way of exposing overconfidence. Not loudly, quietly, through stalled meetings, unanswered calls, and phrases that begin appearing in internal documents, phrases like untenable. That word matters because it signals not discomfort, but collapse, according to individuals with direct knowledge of the discussions. Strategic conversations about the UK re-entry have been underway for weeks. These are not emotional impulses, they are calculations, the kind made when options narrow, when leverage weakens, when time begins to work against you rather than for you. One internal assessment, circulated late last year among advisors, paints the picture with remarkable bluntness. Public perception in the United States has deteriorated. Commercial partnerships are being reconsidered. Conversations paused, doors left half open, then quietly closed. By contrast, the UK, long portrayed as hostile territory, is now described as viable. Not welcoming, viable, a market for rehabilitation. That single word tells you everything. This is not about homecoming, it is about salvage. Behind the scenes, crisis management firms in London have been consulted, emails exchanged, scenarios modeled. The language is not sentimental, it is clinical, gradual reintroduction, controlled exposure, silence period. These are not the words of reconciliation. They are the words of brand triage, and somewhere along the way, the most revealing phrase appears: we're running out of runway. If you understand power, you understand that runway is not money alone. It is goodwill, attention, patience, and once those are depleted, even enormous wealth becomes fragile. What makes this moment especially striking is how methodical the effort appears to be. Meetings, visual timelines, polling data, terms like public sympathy strategy and Windsor reconciliation written not as hopes, but as action items. This is not nostalgia, this is an operation. And yet, the response from the institution they once fled has been remarkably consistent. There is no appetite, no enthusiasm, no sense that time alone has healed what was broken. One message, repeated in different forms, cuts through the noise. Trust, once lost, is not renewable. That may be the most important lesson of all. Before we go any further, pause here. Because if this conversation feels uncomfortably revealing, that's because it is. Subscribe now. Not because this is sensational, but because it is honest in a media climate that rarely is. Stay with me. Because the real story is not about a possible return. It is about why the return is being considered at all. And that takes us across the Atlantic to a country that once welcomed them with open arms and has since, very quietly, looked away. America did not turn overnight. It rarely does. It observes, it waits, and then, when contradictions pile too high to ignore, it withdraws its enthusiasm with a kind of calm finality. The decline in favorability has been steep, dramatic. Even but more telling than public polling is private sentiment, the executives, the sponsors. The decision makers whose enthusiasm determines whether influence translates into opportunity. Their language, when stripped of public politeness, is unforgiving, reputational risk, consumer fatigue. The denunciation of privilege while benefiting endlessly from it. The performance of victimhood from a position of extraordinary security. Americans are tolerant of ambition. They admire reinvention, but they are instinctively skeptical of grievance marketed as virtue. Each disappointment reinforced the sense that the story was no longer moving forward, only circling the same emotional territory, again and again. Eventually, audiences tune out, and when audiences tune out, sponsors follow. But perhaps the most consequential miscalculation was cultural. America enjoys the British monarchy from a safe distance. It treats it as spectacle, tradition, continuity. Attacks on it do not land as courage, they land as ingratitude. When accusations were made regardless of their factual merit, the optics mattered more than the details. A son publicly dismantling his family, a grandson doing so. While his grandmother's era was ending, to Americans, it looked less like justice and more like betrayal. That perception hardened, and once hardened, it became immovable. Now, attention has turned back to Britain with a hope that memory there might be shorter. That familiarity might soften resentment, that proximity might restore relevance. But Britain is not America. Its memory is longer, its tolerance for perceived disloyalty thinner, and its public far less inclined to separate grievance from responsibility. The strategy now being discussed placing one figure forward, while the other receipt reveals desperation more than wisdom, because responsibility was shared. Words were spoken willingly. Books were written deliberately. Interviews were given enthusiastically. Bridges were not burned accidentally. And this is the reality that no crisis plan can rewrite. Influence borrowed from an institution cannot survive the destruction of that institution as credibility. Once the connection is severed, what remains must stand on its own, and standing alone is far harder than anyone imagines. So what we are witnessing is not a redemption arc. It is an inflection point, a recognition that escape is not the same as independence, and that rejection feels different when it comes not from tabloids, but from markets. It is a retreat from a promise that failed to deliver, a quiet acknowledgement that the world did not respond as expected. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe a return is even possible, or has the moment passed beyond repair? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because the public memory, once formed, has a way of shaping history more powerfully than any strategy ever could.